Hello, I'm Morgan Peckman. This is City and State TV. Today, our guest is Howie Hawkins. He is the 2014 nominee for governor for the Green Party, and he was also the 2010 nominee. Mr. Hawkins, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me.
Last election was your campaign, and in 2010 was a great success. You got over 50,000 votes. You secured the line for the Green Party. Is getting 50,000 votes, again, your aspiration this election?
We have 4 goals, and that's the first one. And we think we're very confident of being able to do that. Our second goal is to get a much larger vote. We're aiming at least 250,000 and 5%, which would be as good as any independent left party's ever got in New York State. But after these couple polls that said a unnamed working families candidate would get 24 and then 22%, I mean, I'm a working Teamster with a name. I think maybe we aimed too low. So that's our second goal, is to get a substantial vote. So after the election, there's an independent left in the state, not just liberal Democrats, that the media and the public will be looking to for what we think about issues. Third goal is to build up our grassroots party organization all over the state. And fourth goal, it's in our campaign plan. I'm out here running around.
Is this a Rick Perry moment?
Yeah, well, sort of, but those are the top goals. There's another one in there. I forget how we phrased it, but anyway, we got those are the goals of the campaign.
You had courted the Working Families Party to give you their nomination. It appears increasingly that they're going to be going with Zephyr Teachout as their nominee. Is that a blow to your candidacy, and why do you think that the Working Families Party wasn't more receptive to giving you a chance, given your performance last election?
Although we agree on a lot of policy goals, or at least we're going in the same direction, and Astorino and Cuomo are going in the other direction. They have a very different strategy than us. They want to elect more Democrats. We want to elect independent, progressive candidates that are not compromised by the entanglements with the corporate funders of the major parties. We need to, as working people, organize and act and speak for ourselves. It's time for us to stop relying on others, Democrats who are funded by corporate interests, because in the end, they answer more to the funders than they do to their voters. So that's the difference. They want to elect more Democrats. We want to elect independent people. So we're not surprised that, I made that overture. The first question I was asked after I announced was, what are you going to do if they run? I said they should run, because Cuomo, his platform and his record is the exact opposite of Working Families. And maybe they should nominate me and we have a united fight. And then we did a formal letter after going through our process to them, and they did not respond. So, we're willing to work together on common goals, but we recognize the difference in strategy. So we're not surprised that. And then this person you mentioned is a lawyer. Last time they had a lawyer standing in, and then in the end gave the line to Cuomo. We see them looking like they're going to do that up in the 13th Congressional District, the Wrangell race. They're just waiting to see how that primary sorts itself out. Then they will give their line to the Democrats. So that's really the difference between us. We want a third party representing working people to start electing our own people to represent us, and they want to elect more Democrats. And so just not surprised.
How much of your decision to run again for governor is based upon your estimation of the governor's performance in office?
Well, like I said, our fundamental goal is to not rely on the Democrats to speak for us, because they don't. Our platform, we call it the Green New Deal. We're raising demands that Roosevelt raised in his 1944 State of the Union address to Congress. We're talking about the right to a job, to a living wage, to health care, to quality education, to affordable housing. And we've added the Green New Deal, which would be clean energy. And then it was repeated in the 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. So when we say a $15 minimum wage, they asked for a $2 minimum wage, which adjusted for inflation today would be $15.44. The Democrats have not delivered on those things. So regardless of where Cuomo, his actual record was, in detail, we already knew we were going to run. Now, he's made it a lot easier because he has been very conservative on his economic and fiscal policies. He touts a property tax relief, but it's not real relief. It's you only get it if your municipality stays below the property tax cap. My city, we get about $30. Ithaca, New York, they get $7.31. So they just blew through the cap, and they're still going to have to cut staffing because our school funding level is at a 65-year low. You have to go back to the 40s as a proportion of the state budget. So those fiscal policies, we are hearing from state employees and teachers and parents. In the rural and urban schools, the funding is the big issue. In the suburban school, testing is a big issue. And Cuomo has pushed this, high-stakes testing, which leads to privatization through charters. And it's very unpopular, and I think we're going to get a lot of votes from that sector. So his policies have opened the door for us to get a big vote, I think.
Ralph Nader, when I interviewed him in this last issue, was saying that his goal is to bring together a coalition of people from the left and a coalition of people from the right. When you talk about electing independent candidates, I mean, are you talking about a movement that's coming exclusively from the left, or do you think that there is kind of an undercurrent of populism that can be channeled into electing independent candidates who might not necessarily just represent one viewpoint or another?
Well, the Green Party wants to represent a progressive left position, but we recognize that we share policies, say, with the Libertarians. We want to end the war on drugs and mass incarceration. We should legalize drugs and have it above board taxed, regulated, not an underground economy where drug dealers shoot it out rather than going to court like other businessmen do when they have disputes. We agree with them on a humble foreign policy where we're not intervening everywhere in the world to try to throw our weight around. We agree that corporate welfare is a waste of money, and that, from the Green point of view, I think the Libertarians just want to have no government positive economic development programs, let the market take care of it. We might want to promote certain things, like we want to promote green energy, but we believe rather than giving tax breaks, if the public's going to invest, we should take an equity position, and maybe the private business is the managing partner, but if it's successful, we get a profit back rather than just giving the money away. And we know from studies that one of Cuomo's tax commissions did that the money we have given in corporate welfare since 1994 is actually to those companies that got it. We've lost 175,000 jobs, so it doesn't even create jobs. I think on corporate welfare, the drug war, and foreign policy, and then civil liberties, all this fine, us and the Libertarians agree. We don't agree at all on economics. So it makes sense for us to have different parties running on the ballot, but before, during, and after elections, we can agree on certain issues. So I think there is a basis that Ralph Nader's talking about on certain issues for, the libertarian right and the paleo-conservative right, which doesn't want to do a lot of intervention overseas, and the progressive left to work together. But I don't think that means we are an electoral coalition because we have such differences on other policies.
When you're talking about channeling the grassroots and building a movement in New York State in support of the Green Party agenda, do you see a real appetite for that type of activism in the state? I mean, we have abysmal voter turnout. There seems to be a real dearth of that type of activism that you're talking about. Is that a pipe dream of sorts?
I don't think it's a pipe dream because I've gone door to door in a low-income, mostly black, working-class community that I live in. And when you knock on the door and people get a chance to talk about politics, and they know me because I'm from the neighborhood, I'm not just some guy coming in to get their votes at election time. They really want to talk about the issues. And a lot of those folks, and it's not just in the black community, it's in the Latino community, it's in the white community, it's working people generally, they look at the politicians of both parties and they say, neither of them know about me, I'm invisible to them, they're not talking about me. So what we want to do, rather than just mobilize voters, pull them out for the election or have them show up at a demonstration or do phone banking, this clicktivism they call it online where, these groups get lists and then they try to get people to do things. We want to organize. In other words, get people together and have them think for themselves, think critically, and make their own decisions about what they want to do. So it goes back to the model for me as a Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee when they went into Mississippi and formed the Mississippi Freedom Democrats. It wasn't those student organizers or, a dropout professor like Robert Moses or Bob Moses from Harvard who went down there and organized it and made themselves the spokespeople. They asked the people they were organizing to pick their own. And you got Fannie Lou Hamer, who famously told indirectly Johnson, Mondale and Humphrey, who told her to take the compromise where you get 2 token seats and we'll deal with civil rights in the future and we'll seat the Dixiecrats this year. She said, no, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. That's what happens when people organize and speak for themselves. They won't sell themselves out. Like we've seen so much, like I referenced earlier, the things that we're raising in our Green campaign, the Democrats have given lip service to and between the World War II and the 70s, and then they pretty much dropped them. I mean, we haven't had a serious call for a WPA-style, Works Progress Administration-style jobs program to put people who can't find a job in the private sector to work providing public services or public infrastructure. That kind of thing was very popular, but the Democrats haven't raised it seriously since the Hawkins bill was gutted in Congress in 1978.
And lastly, I mean, you are a member of the Teamsters. The Working Families Party is a coalition of unions, and yet you seem like, you know, that you are not going to get union support for your candidacy. Does that speak ill of the unions, that they wouldn't be supporting somebody like yourself, who is, you know, who should be the model candidate, I presume, for unions to back?
Well, yeah, we have a labor movement where really after World War II, I think we got put to sleep, because between World War II and the 70s, productivity gains were shared equally with labor, so our wages went up with productivity. Since the 70s, our wages have stagnated, and the labor movement is still trying to figure out what happened. They got sucker punched by business. They thought they had a deal, and they're still recovering, and a lot of the leaders think, well, it could be worse if we really fight the boss. You know, our perspective, well, my perspective as a rank and file union member is, we've got to, you know, make our unions more democratic. We got to be more democratic, small d. We've got to get the unions internally organizing, get our folks involved, talking, rather than just trying to mobilize us when, you know, contract time comes, or if there's an election for officers, you know, they're mobilizing us to vote. But in between, you know, frankly, a lot of rank and file union people see the union as like an insurance plan. You pay your dues and you get some benefits, and you're never involved. I think until we do that, the labor movement's going to be politically weak, and relying on the Democrats, that has not got us anything, you know, since the 70s. Stagnant wages, repeated promises of labor law reform, the most recent being the Employee Free Choice Act in Congress, or for card check recognition like they have up in Canada. And that was, you know, promised in 2008, and then nothing happened. And I could take you back to the Truman administration every time there's a Democratic administration. So I know a lot of workers are going to support me. There are some union locals and some labor councils that if the state AFL does not endorse Cuomo, which I think is a good possibility, because I think the teachers and the public employees may sit in the room this time. In 2010, they walked out and let the 2/3 vote go through. I'm hearing they're not going to do that. That frees up local affiliates, and there's some, you know, councils and local unions that have told me they want to endorse me. So it'll be a minority within the labor movement, but I think it's a good step that at least part of the organized labor is saying we're declaring our political independence. The bosses have two parties. It's time we have one of our own. That was the old slogan for a labor party that was attempted to be organized in the 90s. I was part of that too. I'm for, you know, everybody working together. You know, the Greens, we got a ballot line, but it's open to, you know, old Labor Party advocates and others.
Howie Hawkins, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, well, thanks for having me.